Hello, Ben DivKid here. Recently I've been digging through some old hard drives and recovering some data that I thought was long gone, and I've got some additional files back from when I created a series of videos with the artist Devox for their 2019 Telegraph album release. I'll add some text all about this and link to some additional videos that are already out there, but in this video I'm talking to the world-class mastering engineer John Webber, who mastered Devox's album Telegraph. This was filmed 6 years ago, but looking at John's profile now, he's the chief mastering engineer at the legendary Air Studios in London where this was filmed, and his mastering work includes releases from the likes of Duran Duran, Clean Bandit, MF Doom, George Michael, David Bowie, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and plenty more. And this is just an open chat about the mastering process as John approached it back then. I hope you enjoy the chat. I've certainly enjoyed listening back to it. And check out some of those other videos linked below too.
I wanted to take a minute to talk about your general approach to mastering. A piece of music, say, comes in, a new client, existing client. Okay. What's the process? What's kind of going through your mind to start with?
So I guess the first thing we do is we sort of check the file. It's usually a file that comes in these days, but we can still do it with other formats, tapes and whatnot. So the first thing we would do is check that on a technical level, make sure that it sounds good. Listen through to the piece of music, make sure if there's any sort of kind of problems with the mix, then we're in a position these days where you can easily relay that information back down the chain to the mix engineer. Yeah. And things can be fixed at the previous stage before mastering, which is a really handy modern convenience, I guess. We kind of act as a sort of consultation base on a sort of consultation basis these days, a lot more than we used to be able to, where someone's just gone into the studio and done an SSL mix and they've spent
this is all you've got
500 quid a day in the studio. Yeah, exactly. And you have to kind of deal with what you're given. These days we have the luxury of being able to go back a stage and fix any particular problem. So that's become a sort of more of a part of the mastering process than it used to be. So yeah, we sort of lend an ear to it. And then all being well with that, what we would then typically do is we would load the file into sort of playback system. So we may usually playback from a DAW. So we use Magic Sequoia here, which is great for mastering. It's particularly good because it has a sort of an object-based way of working. What that means is every audio region can be an individual object where you can actually insert processes onto.
For the case of the album, it's about, from the get-go, creating the album, the intent of the whole thing, the flow of the whole piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a track by track.
Well, we can do. I mean, obviously people do give us tracks and singles.
Yeah. But you're already thinking of the kind of journey.
Yeah. I mean, I think mastering truly is actually getting a bunch of mixes and bringing a project together, bringing an album together, and putting the final touches on an overall project and thinking about it from a more general standpoint. Because I think when people are mixing, particularly, they're obviously kind of dealing with things as they come on a track-to-track basis, and we're kind of there to sort of put a sort of overall sheen on everything and trying to bring everything together.
There's less of an overall, how does the bass of track 1 compare to track 2 element to mixing. Like you said, it's kind of you're in that zone of that track and trying to balance the stems or the masses of tracks you're given.
Absolutely. And actually with experience and working on lots and lots of albums, is actually a big part of our skill is intuitively knowing when that is an issue and when it's not, because you can go too far with one discipline compared to the other. And what I mean by that is, as you say, write 2 tracks and one's much bassier than the other. Now, a bad mastering engineer might go, well, let's make this track much bassier, so it matches that. Of course. But you're kind of then ignoring what's right for the track. So it's finding that balance between the two. And I think it takes a lot of experience and time and going over and over what you do as a mastering engineer to realise when to make that correct decision and when not to.
Yeah, and I think that only comes with experience. However good your kind of technical chops may be, the artistic intent and being able to understand what the intent of the artist is, as well as your own creative kind of approach. Yeah, that just takes time.
Yeah, and I'd say that's probably the most important part of what we do. I can talk about kind of what we do. We load a file in, we play it out through a D2A converter. We then choose whatever kind of processing we want to use in the outboard world, and then we sort of pass it back in to digital again and capture it. through an A/D converter, and that's basically how we work when we're actually mastering tracks on a track-to-track basis. But it's about so much more than that. It's about, as you say, the integrity, the artistic integrity, supporting the artist's vision. And I'd say every project's different, because some people really rely on you to kind of do what you do and to make those decisions, whereas some clients have a real idea themselves of what they want, and they'll be there by your side, asking you to use your technical expertise to kind of bring that to life for them, because it's kind of beyond their remit at that point.
Yeah, of course.
There's a lot of dealing with people, there's a lot of dealing with people's expectations and what they want.
That final output stage, it's so important. There's no... It's a joke of a term, of course, but the fix it in the mix, I'll fix it in mastering. You can pass that joke stupidly down the chain, but you can't pass that any further.
No.
You're the end of that
starts
chain.
with us. Yeah, totally.
I mean, in terms of process, taking the Devox album or any kind of wide range in electronic music, be it modular or otherwise, do you have any processes that you feel particularly work well? Like, in terms of kind of technical use, is it layering multiple soft stages of compression to get more level? Is it certain, saturation, then EQ, stereo width? What kind of technical things are you looking to do? I guess it applies to any music, not just electronic music.
Well, it does, yes. And interestingly, with this album, we didn't do kind of what you might typically expect to be done on an electronic album. I think a lot of people have this kind of preconceived idea that electronic music is quite processed and crushed and push for loudness, like kind of incorrectly putting a genre like this into the sort of EDM bracket.
Yeah, and it's a total pleasure to hear this not like that. I heard
totally.
It's mastered and then mastered.
Yeah,
and I mean, knowing it was you and being aware of your work, I knew I wasn't going to get a horrible squashed dance master over this kind of album, but it just breathes.
Yeah,
there's a life to it. There's clearly things done, however subtle, just to pull it to life. And
there's actually 2 tracks on this album where we used a Weiss DS1 as an expander. So instead of compressing it, we're actually uncompressing, trying to breathe, as you say, add breath to the overall sound and the overall texture, and sort of impart dynamics into the music instead of going the other way and squashing it. Sometimes electronic music can be a bit too kind of lifeless and on one even kill, there's no dynamics and no musical integrity there. It's just kind of fall to the floor and a load of padded stuff, and it's just all about kind of being excited and banging. But this is a much more kind of there's a much wider palette of sounds here and emotions. It's not a banging dance album. It's a it's a kind of atmospheric at times, and then it's kind of dancey at times, and it kind of shifts through the gears. So that was what was interesting to me.
Specifically for the Devox album, did you find a particular chain that you just really spoke to the audio that you were given through the gear or the software?
No, actually, funnily enough, I used I used quite a lot of outboard EQs on this album. We jumped between pretty much all the ones we have here. We used the Chandler TG Curve Bender EQ on a couple of tracks because it kind of added that kind of rich tonality in the mid-range.
And is that a case of you're listening to the track and your experience tells you which one?
Yeah, I think intuitively,
you
having used these
enough.
Things over and over again, you kind of know what to go for. And then on some tracks, they already had quite a lot of that kind of density in the sound anyway. So I wanted to go for something a bit cleaner. So I might have used the Dangerous Music Bax EQ, for example, just to open things up a bit. And I think we used the API 5500 on a couple of tracks as well. That's quite good at adding a bit of energy back in, but you've also got that kind of a bit of analog richness.
So how much of the process was dictated by knowing what format it was going to be in?
Well, funnily enough,
or was it just mastered for the quality of the music up front?
I think we had vinyl in mind from the start, funnily enough. Quite often, in the modern age of music, people expect one master for one thing and then another master for another. So,
you see
for example, very compressed CD masters don't make good vinyl masters.
No.
They can end up sounding very soft and very over-modded and not translate very well to a lacquer cut at all. Luckily, these guys didn't want that from the off anyway. We wanted like a warm, evoking kind of immersive kind of experience listening to the album sonically. And I think that was the idea everyone had from the off. So actually I didn't really need to do too much adjustment when I mastered the vinyl. I seem to remember that the mixes were a bit different for the sides, so we had to run stuff twice in terms of the output processing and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the approach to actually the CD and the vinyl were very similar in terms of the sound and the overall palette of the sound and the overall tonality and levels and the way the album flows.
Yeah, and thinking of the vinyl, how much are you having to change what you're doing as you get through the album in terms of bass response being better, start of the record, losing top end as you go in?
Sure, okay.
You know, tonal response of the vinyl changes. You'll know far more than about this than me, but as you get through the album, are you having to readjust as you go, or?
Well, with this, there wasn't too much of that to consider. First of all, it's a double album, so we were able to sort of only use, say, sort of 70-80% of a side.
So not cramming,
and not have to worry too much.
Minutes.
Yeah, no. So all those kind of end of side issues you get with vinyl, where the top end rolls off or distorts, that was less of an issue because we had that freedom to be able to do. We had the space per side because it's like 15-minute sides. So that was great. So that kind of really helped with the overall quality of the sound from start to finish. None of that distortion wasn't really an issue. Secondly, the kind of music it is, there wasn't too many percussive high frequency issues. For example, there's no vocals, for example, and one of the main problems with cutting alongside is when you've got a very sibilant vocal and you've got those kind of peaky high frequency blasts that are not vinyl friendly. So we had none of that to really deal with. There's a lot of fidelity, I think, that we got onto the record, and and obviously when I cut the record, I was using like scrap lacquers and stuff, and they'd be in between the digital playback, which by the way was done. I think we did it at 96K, so we did it quite high res. So we had the most integral kind of master possible to cut to vinyl. It's not just the CD master cuts to the lacquer. We created a high-res file for that purpose.
For anyone getting into or needing to master their own music, just to give it maybe a soft touch to before it goes online, have you any kind of tips or tricks on, obviously don't do anything too heavy-handed, but a default chain maybe that would work? Should people be looking to, you know, for the kind of gearheads that are watching? I make modular videos, so there's a ton of gearheads.
They probably want me to say, yes, go use this, do this and do this.
Yeah, but without specifically doing that.
I can't honestly do it. Because it doesn't work like that. Sound doesn't work like that.
I knew that.
If I said compress this, I mean, I remember when I was first getting into this. I remember you read like sound. Can I say that? Can I read a media music technology outlet?
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah, whatever. But you read like an article, and I would say, oh yeah, get a compressor.
This ratio.
Set it to this ratio, and don't compress by more than 3 dB gain reduction, and then get an EQ. Set it to 10K and then boost the shelf by half a dB, and that's going to work every time. So, well,
without going too specific, is there anything, the order that things come within, or considerations to make in certain frequency areas, or is there any kind of general advice that people can try and apply?
I think the best thing you can do, really, I think low end is always a problem in the modern, actually even in big rooms, big mix rooms, the low end can be very hard to judge. And you can only really get a full perspective of what's correct when you play it on different systems and in different environments. I think it's very hard to master a track in the environment that you mixed it in, because any kind of problems with that environment are just going to mount up. They're not going to be fixed and eradicated. Which is one of the main reasons why I'd always advocate going to a mastering engineer. So again, it's hard for me to answer that question because I have this kind of beliefs and also kind of experience of knowing why mastering doesn't work when you do it yourself.
I think there's a huge thing to just having someone else do it. Whether that's an engineer like yourself, or just, it's hard to measure these things, or just a friend at a similar level, similar ears, different system, just getting out of that space and your own ears and having someone else.
I think the most important thing is make sure your mix is good, and then we basically don't really do too much to it when it's a good mix. And if there is something kind of wildly, I mean, quite often I'll have to go back to people and say, you know, the bass end is quite wildly too much, and then, oh really, it sounds fine on my speakers, and then they might then compare it to a commercial track and then realise, you know, that there's an issue there.
I think that's probably the most, well, it's you as a person and the experience, obviously, but that's probably the most valuable thing, is that being able to address the mix. I think having someone tell you what's wrong is probably going to have a bigger change.
Yes.
If they can fix these things and you be able to feedback and get this across to them, then what gear you've got to adjust it afterwards.
Plus, I think it's also a good point to say that I think the kind of concept of mixing and mastering, the lines have come quite blurred for some reason. I mean, the amount of times we get a mix which, oh, could you master it, make it sound great, and then they've piled all this processing on the master bus of the mix. Now, a master bus is called a master bus because that's where you put the processing for the mastering. So they've kind of attempted to master the track themselves, and that can be creatively valid, because especially if they've got it on during the mix process and they're mixing in, because you take all that
into the process.
Exactly, that's exactly what the concept of mixed bus compression is. And then the mistake with that is that people will do a mix and then put a mixed bus compressor on. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. The actual gain reduction and the way a mixed compressor works is part of the mix process. When you're making decisions, going in, feeding signals into
that
it.
Sound. If you're
exactly, and that's
are you producing
valid.
To be loud from the off? Because that's a very different approach to just capturing raw sound.
Absolutely.
At which point you don't just want to squash it out.
No.
Anyway, so we spoke about the vinyl specifically. Thinking of downloads and digital, how much of your time now is spent, you know, thinking about playback levels and average levels on YouTube and Spotify? And
honestly, very little.
Is it still all just about making the song or the album right?
It absolutely is, yes. And I think it's those kind of, the way that the modern streaming world operates, where everything's kind of, every streaming
they all
service
have their own average.
All have their own average, which, to be fair, they're all within a few dB of each other.
Yeah, so they are.
I think that's actually kind of a positive thing, because there's less need to just squash things for loudness' sake.
I like that it's killing the loudness thing, but
it's a very CD era kind of mentality.
But with a dynamic album like Telegraph, do you have to think about, maybe we need to add a little bit more compression so that we're in this average level somewhere, or does that still not even come into the thought process?
No, because I think at the level we mastered, if you think about the actual kind of peak output or the average level output of the master, it's pretty much at or slightly above where most of these streaming sites set the level anyway. So it's going to perfectly slot into that world. And then if you've got like the latest, who can I scold? Lady Gaga release or something, and that's been like, and actually, to be fair, her albums sound pretty good. But do you know what I mean? Like,
latest commercial.
Yeah, the latest guy. I don't know what the kids listen to now, but something that's massively squashed. I mean, the issue with that is it's going to have to be turned down.
Yeah,
to match
its peak is down.
Yeah, to match the integrated loudness level that streaming site wants.
So then ultimately this is louder, because its average will average out within that system. But this still
not necessarily louder, but it'll sound a lot more open. It won't have that constrained.
Yeah, peak loudness is louder.
Exactly.
Because their averages are
exactly. And if anybody thinks that something's louder sounds better, they need to kind of look at the reason why.
Controls.
Because they're actually that's the psychoacoustic thing. That's you listening. That's your brain telling you, and your ear telling you that it's more exciting because it's louder. If you then turn that audio down, I mean, everyone talks about this now, so I'm sure it's pretty common knowledge these days, but you turn that level down and then listen to a version of your source mix, even say it's a good mix, and you really crushed it, and you're like, oh, this sounds really exciting and punchy and loud. If you then turn that down, say 6 dB to match the average level of your mix, and then you flick between the two,
it's nice.
That's the real acid test. It's like, have you made it better? And most of the time you haven't. Most of the time you've caused damage and made it less exciting and flat sounding, and the bass is all constrained. It doesn't have the extension and the roll, and the top end's got fizzy and hard sounding, and it's really interesting. And I think it's positive, and as I say, in the new age, it's funny how the digital age has actually allowed us to do that, where music's become
to stop squashing.
less squashed, and we can be a bit more expressive as mastering engineers as well, not just trying to make everything loud all the time.
And I don't think anyone watching will have expected you to say you were using expanders to add dynamic range and effectively lower the average level than just compression and limiting. I think it's the opposite of what some people think mastering actually is.
Yeah, well, there's loads of headroom in the mix anyway, so the overall level of the mixes were louder, but it was more to do with the integrated dynamics within the mix and expanding that and making it kind of breathe a bit more and have a bit more dynamic.